Hello and happy Pride! My name is Kelly Johnson and I have a PhD in human sexuality. I'm here to answer some questions and help you have a great Pride celebration. Before we get started with question and answer, let's just go over a couple of major points that I would be making through a question and answer panel if I were sitting on a panel. One is that it's really important to recognize you are who you are worthy, you are wonderful. You may be part of the LGBT community, you may be an ally. We are all here to support people who identify as queer, lesbian, gay, bisexual, questioning, intersex, the whole spectrum. And I want you to feel good about who you are in your body. So one more piece of advice I'd like to give is to talk to you about when a person recognizes they're not in the heteronormative population. Sometimes when people are born, they know they're part of the LGBTQ community. Sometimes people evolve over time and are aware during their adolescence as they're going through puberty that they're not like most of their friends who are getting excited about the other sex. It could be you and you're in your mid-30s and all of a sudden you run into somebody that you're like, whoa, they knock your socks off and they're of the same sex. So when we're thinking about sexual orientation and gender identity, it can be something that we know right from the beginning of our life, or it can be something that evolves over time, or maybe it's something that comes up in midlife or later in life. Okay, now let's get to some questions. The first question that we've been sent is, I'm nervous about bringing up protection, especially when we're going hot and heavy and in the moment. My first advice is don't wait till you're hot and heavy and in the moment to start talking about protection, because we've got all these hormones going on and we are probably going to want to go farther than what we would do if we had the conversation outside of being in the moment. So I would recommend having this conversation before you get into the moment. And having this conversation can be really sexy and eventually lead up to a moment, but I would encourage you to have it while the hormones are not flowing. I think a good way to start is I believe in open and honest communication, and I'd like to have a talk to you about how we're going to protect ourselves if we get physically involved. And then your conversation can go from there. And I think by you laying it out on the table, it's going to be a lot easier to talk about and have that conversation. You can also say, I was tested in my last relationship, which was 6 months ago, and because of COVID or because of whatever reason, I haven't been in a relationship since. Would you like for us to be tested together? I'd be happy to get tested again. My last test, I tested negative, but would be happy to go and get retested. And I think it would be fun if we went together. And remember, if one of you is positive for a sexually transmitted infection, that's okay. That is not the end of the world. It is just something that you have to work around. There are many, many, many people out there with sexually transmitted infections, and all it means it's a little hump that you have to get over and maybe a little bit of extra protection that is needed. Our next question is how do I have the best sex I can have? This is a question I get a lot, and one of my most common responses is to talk about it. Communication, communication, communication. Talk beforehand about what you like. Again, this can be really sexy. It can kind of create a fantasy of these are the things that I want to do to you. These are the things that I want to participate in. And don't feel bad about what you're interested in. So long as it is consensual and it is among adults, it is okay. We live in a society that our foundation can be somewhat puritanical, and we think anything outside of very vanilla sex is something to be ashamed of. It is not. What one person calls vanilla can be kinky to another person. What somebody considers kinky is completely normal and something they participate in, and never in a million years would have thought that it would have been considered kinky. So having that communication, talking to the person, and I think especially when you're in a new relationship, make sure that when you're having these communications that you're not judging the other person, that you're listening with an open mind and seeing how you can listen to what they're saying and incorporate it into the play that you're having. Okay, and our next question is, how do I navigate hookups or friends with benefits? There needs to be a lot of communication. That is, there needs to be a lot of boundaries, there needs to be a lot of understanding. In the end, usually somebody gets hurt. Somebody begins, there are these boundaries, we're just friends with benefits, we are not in a dating relationship, we are not gonna fall in love. And it's not uncommon if the relationship goes on for a minute, that somebody is gonna fall in love. So I don't want people not to do it, but I think going into a relationship like that with your eyes wide open is beneficial. Some people may be in a committed relationship and bring up the idea of having an open relationship. And there are two guides that I think are helpful if you are considering an open relationship. One is called the ethical slut, and the other one is called opening up. And those may be guides that can be helpful to talking to your partner and coming up with some boundaries around having an open relationship. Okay, those were the questions that we had, and I wish we could be in person, and I hope you are isolated in your home, having a good old time and having your own Pride celebration, and fingers crossed next year we are going to be marching and celebrating in person in downtown Asheville and having a great time. Happy Pride!